Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 8-hour chart of silver denominated in euros. And the reason why I chose this chart is because I was noticing the recent strength in the euro, but then a little weakness as we have gone the last couple days. And I was comparing that to the price of silver. I actually was creating a chart which was a silver euro cross, but it's actually a lot easier to just pull up the chart of silver in euros. And as you can see here, the euro silver chart is approaching a breakout point here from this 25.5 level. Now, there's a lot of congestion back in here, a lot of congestion back in here, but if we can break through this point, then we really are kind of in a free sailing range. You can see you had a takeoff and smackdown there, but other than that, the next real level of congestion or resistance is going to be right about in here, which is around 27 euros. So silver in the euro is actually stronger than it is in the dollar, and that's a good thing ultimately for those who are stacking in Europe. If we go out and take the long view, we'll go out to the daily, and a couple of notable things here. First of all, this September smackdown that occurred in silver, you can see that it was a tremendous smackdown in the euro as well. Actually, this size of this move is larger than the May move. The September move was a very large move, but you can see we've more than 50% made up for that move that occurred in September, and we've actually retraced 1/3 of the May move. So let's jump over real quick to US silver prices to make a comparison here. So with the US silver price, you can see that we've made almost 50% back of the September smackdown, but you can see we're really just barely touching the beginning of the May smackdown. So as far as silver prices go, the silver is much stronger in the euro. Now, if we look at the euro chart, just the straight chart, we can see that it started to fall off a little bit recently. Let's go to the close by view. And you can see that the euro kind of made a top here. We'll back out one. And it came up and bounced up above this area here, which it tested before. So there's a resistance level right about there. And so the euro has kind of hit a wall and is now kind of turning down, but silver isn't really following. Silver is still very strong. It is acting like it wants to go higher in the way that it does when it's butting up against a ceiling. This area in here is actually, this trend channel that's forming right here is very bullish, because these type of pennants that you see, this is actually a very unusual type of pennant that we're seeing forming here. And now this is back in the dollars, but the pennant that's forming is a rising pennant. These pennants that we had before, and they break out of these patterns to the upside, but this is a rising one, which is very unusual to see. You can see most of these are falling pennants. This one actually is sort of a flat one here. So the one we're on right now is, in my opinion, a very, very bullish scenario, and we may actually see a breakout, a very violent breakout to the upside. That's the type of thing you see when you have a rising bull market where the stochastic readings and the MACD readings simply don't work because they just kind of butt up against the ceiling and then they reset and then they just butt up against it again. So when you have a very, very strong bull market, and of course the same thing goes for a very, very strong bear market, the indicators really don't work. The only indicators that work are the bottoms. So I'll show you that here with the MACD. The same is true with the stochastic, but I like the MACD the best. So when you're in a rising market, what happens is your buy signals work and your sell signals fail. So you can see we had a sell signal here, right, and a buy signal there. The buy signal gave us a nice gain. The sell signal really didn't give us anything, and it was quickly erased. We have another sell signal here and went down and was erased, but we had a buy signal here and it was very valid. So in a very strong bull market, you're going to look for the crossovers to the upside on the MACD. You're going to tend to ignore these because they're just going to churn this action off and then they're going to turn and rise. So we may be looking at that very soon here, even in the overnight. We are transitioning into a bull phase. That's how you know you're transitioning into a bull phase, is your bull signals are valid and your bear signals are false. So I want to jump over to the coins real quick. Now, I had often covered in the past the very well-known mints. A lot of people, the well-known dealers. A lot of people have commented on my channel and said, well, I think you're being paid by APMEX or Gainesville. I don't receive any money from any of these people. It would be nice at some point in the future to have some type of advertising arrangement, but I don't have that. So I cover APMEX and Gainesville simply because they're the two biggest ones out there, and also because they have real-time pricing on their coins, and that's something that I've used to buy on the dips, the ability to lock in a very, very low price. For example, at the 2008 low, I was able to buy at $8.50. I didn't get $8.50 for the silver, but I actually was able to purchase when the price hit $8.50 and the coins on APMEX were adjusted to that price. So that's why I cover those two sites. It's not any kind of deal I have with them. I just like those sites, and those sites give the ability to buy at a low price. But I'm going to cover one of the alternatives here, and that's Scottsdale Silver. That a lot of my viewers recommend them. You can see there's not the greatest selection here compared to APMEX, but they do have these Scottsdale rounds. Now, unfortunately, this coin is a 20-ounce round. I really don't like anything more than 1 ounce, so 20 ounce is going to be really bulky, but it is a beautiful round. I don't know if they have this round in 1 ounce. I would be much more willing to buy it in a 1 ounce round. But they also have the Fiji Taku, and you can see that I really like this coin. I've pointed out in the past that when you get this coin in person, you'll be surprised that it's even more beautiful than what you see in these pictures. Unfortunately, it does come in tubes, so they are kind of dinged. Not really bad, but they're not like Perth Mint products that come in sealed coin plastic. So you can see the price for the wire transfer here is about $7.85. You can get it as low as $7.64 for 25 or more on a wire transfer. So that comes to about 37, 38, about 38 bucks a coin. That's $5 over spot, so that's not too bad for that coin. I really think that that's going to be a winner in the future. You've got the Philharmonics that you can buy. You've got the American Eagles that you can buy, and you've also got the 1 ounce Buffalo rounds if you like those. And you can see those are just a little bit above $35 an ounce. So there's some good deals on Scottsdale, and for those of you who are interested, I recommend that you go ahead and pick up what you can find there. Now, I wanted to jump over to Gainesville, and I did a search for the Perth Mint products, and I actually found that they did have in stock the Koala, the 2012 Koala, and my initial reaction to it was very similar to what most people said, in that they thought that it was kind of a ugly coin relative to the previous Perth Koala issues. So I wanted to take a closer look at the coin. First of all, I think it's a fairly good price at $37.92. Now I know I've mentioned before I don't like to pay much more than $1 over what you get your Eagles or Maples for. Those are usually $2 to $2.99 over spot. So with spot at about $33.50, then Eagles and Maples should be going, we'll just say $3, should be going for $36.50. So you can see you're paying about $1.50 more than you're going to pay for your standard Canadian and American bullion coins. But that's not too bad if you project this to be a successful semi-numismatic bullion play. So I did pick up a picture of it. I've been looking for these for a while and I haven't been able to find them. So I did get a high relief image of this coin. So sometimes with the coins you don't get the initial impression by the far away relief image. This is a close-up, and so I'm starting to reconsider, just like I did with the Cougar, this coin at $1.50 above what you pay for Eagles and Maples. I think that probably I'm going to be in favor of this coin. So there's another flip-flop. I did a flip-flop on the Cougar, and I think I'm doing a flip-flop on this 2012 Koala. So I think I'm going to go thumbs up on that coin as well. You can see the Kookaburra here is above 40. So that's really the only play on Gainesville right now. So for tonight, I'm going to say I'm thumbs up for the 2012 Kookaburra. I'm sorry, 2012 Koala. And I'm going to be thumbs up for the 2011 Fiji Taku 1 ounce on Scottsdale, which you can get for about 38 or so. So those are the two picks that I'm doing for tonight. Now I want to jump over to the main topic, and that's going to be a little bit off topic normally for silver, but this is something that's been on my mind recently, and that is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, for those of you who are not aware or have not studied the Constitution and Bill of Rights, it's actually not a really large document. There's really not a lot of writing there. For the amount of laws that we have passed and the amount of regulations that we're under, if you look at the ideas that are covered in this document, and of course the preceding document, which is the Declaration of Independence, which the key feature of that document is that the derivation of inalienable rights. So I did spend a number of amount of time in the past in law school and studying these things, and if you know lawyers and you've been around lawyers, they're some of the strangest people around. They can have something right in front of their face and they just don't seem to be able to see it. But so we live in a society that's plagued by lawyers, but these lawyers really don't understand law. Of course, our president is a constitutional scholar, but after looking at some of the executive orders and laws that we've seen passed, we'd have to wonder. But I wanted to do a quick review of the Constitution and the understanding that you need to have if you want to comprehend where the founding fathers of this nation were coming from. Now, to begin with, the overall framework to understand the Constitution of the United States is you need to understand the context and the environment where it came from. The framers of this document were people who came from a tyrannical monarchy where they had no rights and they were subject to arbitrary and capricious and unjust and tyrannical bills and rules. And so they created a document which was derived from other documents that came from things like the Magna Carta. You can see the English Bill of Rights here. So a lot of these ideas were around before that time, but they coalesced in the document which is known as the United States Constitution. Now, in my mind, for you to understand the Constitution and why it was written and what it was written about, you have to understand the basic underlying principles. The basic underlying principle of the Constitution is that it is a document to prevent tyranny. In other words, it is a codified set of rules that will create relationships and obligations amongst governmental bodies, setting the bounds that they have the powers to step within and not step beyond. So the purpose of the document is to prevent a tyranny from occurring in this new land that the framers had set up governments in. Now, they had come together as independent states, and so when we go down to the 10 amendments, now you have to remember that the first 10 amendments of the Constitution were actually not part of the original Constitution. They were added because of the concern that they would not recognize these things, so they codified these things, and I think their concern was well-founded. So if we look at the 10th Amendment, we can see the spirit with which the other amendments, the reason why they were penned. The 10th Amendment states, and the summary is, the power of the states and the people. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So the reason they added that is, they would have considered that to be redundant and not necessary, was that the Constitution only allowed the federal government to do what it specifically was told to do. Anything that it was not told to do, such as decide what type of food you can eat, or decide what type of medicine you should use, or decide what type of insurance plan you should buy, and the list is endless. They felt that it wasn't even necessary to state that because it was obvious that the granted powers to the federal government didn't allow those things. But I think that it was very good that they actually went and wrote these things down. So when we look at these amendments, you can see these are the things, and this is going to support my point so you'll understand that this document is an attempt to stop tyranny from forming. That is the essence, that is the core of this document, and you can see it in all of these amendments. If you read all of these amendments and you keep that in mind, you'll see that the intent of the Founding Fathers was to prevent the type of tyrannical dictatorship or tyrannical government from forming on these shores which they had fled from. So the First Amendment obviously protects the free exercise of religion, it protects free speech, it protects the press, and it protects the right of assembly and the right of petition. Now, many of these rights have already been eroded, and we're going to see that in every one of these amendments. The Second Amendment protects the rights of the state militias to keep and bear arms. You have to remember that these were groups of independent states, and for the most part they had their own individual constitutions that guaranteed the rights of the people variously as they set them forth. So if you didn't agree with the rights that you had under that state constitution, you were perfectly free to flee to another state. That was another part of the genius of the design of this document, that it gave the right of free travel between these states, so that if you didn't like it, the situation in one state, you could go to another state. Of course, the Third Amendment springs from the quartering of troops that the King of England did, and we can see the erosion of that now with the rise of a sort of police state in this country and around the world. So that is obviously a very valid or relevant thing right now. Unreasonable search and seizure. Just today, the Supreme Court, I'm very glad the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that placing an electronic tracking device on someone's vehicle is a clear violation of their rights. The feds have been doing this for a while now. So obviously the framers were correct in understanding that. And this talks about how people should be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from being rifled through by government agents. So their idea was that for someone to come into your house and search it, they need to describe what they're looking for and who they're looking for, and a warrant must be issued with probable cause. So if you watch the stories on YouTube, you can see with the knock and crash and bang and shooting people's dogs and all that stuff. Obviously, this is under assault as well. Now, the Fifth Amendment guarantees your right to not incriminate yourself. That means that you cannot be compelled to testify against yourself. Now, I would say, at least in my mind, that testing someone, drawing their blood against their will, is a form of forcing them to testify against themselves. Obviously, forcing someone to answer questions without an attorney, etc., that's going to be the same thing. And there's a lot of other things contained in here, some of which the Supreme Court has supported, some of which they have eroded. The Sixth Amendment is the right to trial by jury. That is a concern that has to do with the power of the sovereign to corrupt the prosecutorial process and be able to persecute. And you have many other things that are forbidden in the Constitution. Bills of attainder, for example, which are legislative acts that name certain parties. Those are absolutely forbidden by the Constitution. So they were very concerned about having due process and the right to be tried by a jury of your peers, so that the sovereign, in this case the sovereign would be the federal government, doesn't have the power to simply pick their enemies and persecute them. The Seventh Amendment, trial by jury, etc. The Eighth Amendment, excessive bail. Now, if you remember the recent case with Kim.com and Mega Upload, there was no bail set in that case. And of course, cruel and unusual punishment. We already know about the torture that has been used and has now been, with the NDAA, apparently been applied to American citizens. And of course, excessive bail. There cannot be excessive bail. Now, the rights that are not enumerated by these rights are not, they put this in as the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So they're saying very, very clearly here that there are many, many other rights that are not specifically stated here, such as I pointed out before, the right to decide what type of food you're going to eat or grow or sell, or any of those other things that are now under attack. And I've already covered the 10th Amendment. So just to summarize, to understand the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, you need to put it in the framework of a document that was created by people who had fled from tyranny. And this was an attempt by them to codify certain controls and restrictions, and there are many others that I haven't covered here. There is the bicameral legislature, there are the three branches of government, there was the original election of the representatives by the people in the states, and the senators would be elected by the legislators in those states, and there was the right of free commerce, and there were restrictions on taxes, etc. There were also restrictions on their ability to regulate gold and silver. Of course, gold and silver were denominated as money specifically, and the states were not allowed to use anything other than gold and silver. So there were many other things that are in the Constitution, but if you want to understand them and put them in perspective, you need to understand them in terms of a group of people who are trying to write a document that will prevent a tyranny from coming to pass. And so that is something that you should think about with the types of things that you see coming to pass today, that the people who are in power today really consider the concepts and the principles that are enshrined in this document as anathema. They don't believe and they don't agree with those principles, and they're doing everything they can to undermine those principles. And it is your job, and in my opinion, your duty to advocate and educate and help people understand why the framers created these rights, or created the explanation of these rights, these inherent rights, and why they set up this government in the first place to preserve these rights. So that's my speech on that. Back to the silver chart. We are going to be testing this flag formation tonight. We're still in a series of rising pennants, and I expect that if we pull out here to the 2 hour, I expect a serious test of our next level is going to be 36. It's going to be this resistance here. We really have this to get through. If we can get through this, I think we're probably going to rapidly go up and test the previous high back up here around 40 or so. And then, of course, if we can get through the 44, we're going to go back up and test that 48. I fully expect there have been a couple of calls recently. I think Moolman calls for $140 silver this year. Sprott definitely believes we're going through 50 this year. So if those calls are correct, we should see during this early year through spring time frame rapid moves into the high 30s and 40s, and then on through into new highs. And we'll talk to you next time.